thank you very much indeed for inviting me to come over here and speak at this meeting. We're right in the middle of a general election campaign in the United Kingdom, as you may know. And so I've been on the doorstep and canvassing on behalf of my very great friend and colleague, Lynn Featherstone, who was my predecessor at DFID and has made a huge difference in this area, and we are hoping to return her. But it's amazing to come back to Washington. I was thinking that it's many years since I was here, I think, probably before most of you were born. As I did my PhD, I was fortunate to do my PhD in the United States. And I had a friend in Washington. I came down here quite a bit. And it is the most amazing city. And this meeting is about trying to ensure that girls and women across the world have the opportunities that many of you have got and that I was fortunate to have. So I thank you very much indeed for the work that you are doing in this field, seeking to combat violence against women and girls and trying to ensure that women and girls have access to the education that they should have access to, and that came through so forcibly in that poem from the Kenyan girl, that she should have the same opportunities that her brothers had. So I'm delighted to be here. As Kathy, in her incredibly generous tribute, and I absolutely would wish to reciprocate. Kathy has been absolutely fantastic, and it's incredibly important that as we move forward, what has already been achieved is now built on, and it is brilliant that Kathy is continuing to do that. But the United Kingdom has indeed put this as a high priority, and I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able to do that. There's so much to do. And across the world, wherever we are, women and girls are likely to be the most vulnerable, the most marginal, in whatever country we are in. And it was interesting recently meeting the gender minister from Finland. And Finland is probably about as far ahead as any country you could imagine in terms of gender equality. And she commented that her foreign minister had said that Finland was the least failed state. In other words, even Finland, there was room for improvement. And I know that in the United States there are remarkable progress has been made, and we look to you for that lead, and we hope that if there are pressures forcing us in the other direction in Europe, that you will help us to focus again on this incredibly important area. So I want to talk about why tackling violence matters, including in schools, and some of the approaches that we can use to tackle this. And you probably don't need to be told that. I think that what you heard in the poem, what you heard from Kathy, and what you've heard from others makes it incredibly clear. But it is actually quite a new approach to be aware that this is something which can and should be tackled and holds women and girls back. If I look back 20 years or so, there might have been a focus on trying to get girls into education, but it was taken as a given that, of course, rape is something that happens in war, that violence against women and girls is just something which has to be put up with. The arguments that happened in this country as well as in my country about domestic violence, and that it wasn't appropriate for the police to be involved in something which was just simply a domestic matter, and so on, illustrates the fundamental assumptions that people came with when approaching this topic. And it is a shocking figure that at least 1 in 3 women and girls will be abused or will be beaten or sexually abused in their lifetime. And I think that That's probably an underestimate when we look at some of the figures that are beginning to come through in some countries. So millions of girls, and boys in fact, will suffer from violence in school. And I think that Cathy very clearly laid out in the girls' day the points at which the girl would be in danger, including in school, not only from her peers, but also from those whom you would expect to be looking after her, her teachers, and even when she goes back home, potentially from her family, from her parents. The very fact that they feel that it's appropriate, for example, to marry a girl off early, that is a form of abuse against girls. So even those whom you would expect to be protecting will not necessarily be doing it. And we know that women and girls who experience violence are more likely to be locked into a cycle of poverty. We know that they're more likely to die in childbirth, and the girl that Cathy mentioned would have been at severe risk being pregnant at the age she was. And we know that they're more likely to contract HIV or AIDS. So girls and boys may experience many forms of violence in and around school, but they can experience it in different ways. Girls are much more likely to be victims of sexual harassment, assault, psychological abuse, especially from male peers and teachers. And a girl who experiences such violence is less likely to complete her education. She can be afraid, understandably, of going to school and be reluctant to speak up in class. She may eventually drop out of school. And violence has far-reaching consequences. It not only affects girls' education, but her physical and emotional well-being and future prospects. So it helps to perpetuate the gender inequalities that we're trying to tackle. And that gender inequality is not only, of course, in school, but in community and in wider society. We also know that violence breeds violence. Children who are exposed to violence are more likely to be accepting of it as adults. And that may mean that boys are more likely to meet it out as adults and girls to think that it's acceptable and part of what they have to put up with as adults. So it's a cycle that we must seek to break. And the education system is a unique opportunity to try to do this and to try to confront and challenge the root causes of violence. My department, the Department for International Development in the United Kingdom, has been scaling up what it does in these areas. And we've now got programs in 29 countries. And we're seeking to provide accessible services and safe spaces to women and girls, but also to design programs to seek to prevent violence before it starts. And these programs cover work in a range of sectors, including education. And we're seeking to ensure that all children gain a good quality education in environments free from violence. And we're also supporting and helping to build education systems that contribute, we hope, to a society which is more gender equitable. So in 2011, seeking to take this forward, we set up the Girls' Education Challenge Fund. And I'm delighted to hear about the latest initiative from Michelle and Barack Obama in terms of supporting girls' education. And our Girls' Education Challenge Fund is the largest global fund dedicated to girls' education. And we're supporting marginalised girls to progress through primary and secondary school. And it is important to recognise that, because it's one thing to get girls into primary school, it's another thing to see them through and into secondary school. And it is an indication of whether that education has proved to be as we would wish it to be, as to whether they're able to move on to secondary school. So it's quite a good test of whether that education is working. And 24 out of the 37 projects supported by the fund have activities that directly address violence. And we've developed a guidance note, which I think is available here, for different advisors and program managers working in education to help to ensure that we address violence in all of our education interventions. And if that is here, as I hope it is, then maybe people would wish to pick that up. But these are not problems simply of developing countries, and we need fully to recognise that, and clearly you do. And we have therefore prioritised addressing these within schools in the United Kingdom as well. And there are all sorts of new forms coming, as it were, online, and that is the online bullying, which can so often happen, and the concern over body image and so on that girls often develop, and so engendering an inequality. And I hear from my own children how current that is. We're also seeking to work out what works, and we've got a comprehensive programme of research with the South African Medical Research Council on that, because clearly making sure that what we're doing makes a difference is key. So I want to refer to another Kenyan girl, a girl called Mary, who aged 10 wrote to her head teacher about being forced into marrying a 40-year-old man, and she desperately wanted to stay in school. And it was because of what the Girls' Education Challenge had prepared the head teacher for, that this head teacher was able to address this particular case and ensure that that is not the track that this girl took. She was, in the end, she was counselled and mentored, and within 2 weeks she was back in class and she was living in a dormitory constructed at the school. That's not ideal, but at least she had prospects for the future. So her life didn't, as it were, take the track that the girl writing the poem feared might happen. So it isn't, we can't be simply dealing with the immediate crisis, which is what happened in that particular instance. We need to secure a sea change so that Mary's family would not even have thought of marrying her off at the age of 10 to a 40-year-old man, that her rights should be such that she should have as fulfilled a life as her brothers. And it's for all the Marys of the world, and for all of us too, that we must continue to work together to seek to end violence against women and girls and ensure that they have their full rights to education and to a fulfilled life thereafter. That's what your work is about. That's what we need to work together to seek to achieve. Thank you very much indeed.